As a child, I watched multiple marriages end very poorly. I saw the damage that was done.
Dr. Lee is a marriage coach with 35 years in practice.
Because I wanted to just say clearly, this is how you save a marriage. Anger that's not resolved ends up being resentment. And resentment is what gets most marriages in trouble.
You get late from the office, come home, and your wife is shouting. And basically, you also start shouting, saying like, listen, I had a lot of work in office and it's been a bad day for me as well.
The story that somebody tells themselves about why they're late is the problem. When things are in trouble, people claim we're not compatible because that makes them feel better about it.
So today's episode is going to be really, really interesting because I am in conversation with Dr. Lee Baucom. Dr. Lee is a marriage coach with 35 years in practice, and today we are going to talk about a lot about core reasons why marriages get into trouble. So Dr. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
My first question is, why did you choose to help couples? It's a very sensitive area wherein if things go wrong, they might blame you, right?
Usually when somebody is seeing people for a marriage work, it's already going wrong. And so the stakes are a little lower just because of that. But so to go back, I knew in college that I wanted to be a therapist. And so when I got into graduate training, I did individual training and then branched over to marriage and family therapy training to look at the system. And was interested in how we help people have better marriages. Partly because when I was a kid, and my extended family, as a child, I watched multiple marriages end very poorly. And I saw the damage that was done to that, to the family, to the people, to even my cousins, who some of them I don't even know where they are. And I think that's what drew me to wondering what can help marriages be better. It was towards the end of my training that I read an article back in the 90s about life coaching. And I turned to my wife as I was writing my dissertation and said, this is kind of what I do. So I finished up my training. I was already in therapy practice. And I got training as a coach to bring that perspective in. And so the reason that I got into the world is because I saw the damage. The reason I did coaching is because I saw the limits, the damage that therapy offered to marriages of not being able to help.
Okay, nice. And what were the early days like? Like when you started coaching people, what was the reaction?
So most people don't know whether they're being coached or it's therapy, right? Because they're very similar. It's communication styles. And I was already working in that direction. Part of the reason was because, marriage therapy, traditionally, you're not supposed to give advice. You're supposed to be reflecting and being in conversation with people. And people who are in troubled marriages don't know what to do. They need a roadmap. And so part of what coaching allowed me to do was to be clear. This is how you have a better marriage, and help them understand what was getting in their way. I had lots of people who had already been to other therapists and had not made any progress. And I ended up being kind of the therapist of last resort for a number of people. That's what led to when I first started creating my Save the Marriage program, because I wanted to just say clearly, this is how you save a marriage. So the early days were, after I got out of kind of seeing it from the therapy model, the early days were good. Being in the therapy world, watching how poorly therapy was helping people in marriages to have a better marriage was frustrating, because I'd spent a lot of time in the training and just saw repeatedly the research wasn't backing up what we were trying to do.
So when you decided to become a marriage coach, so what were the early challenges you faced when setting up your coaching business?
Yeah, so because I was in an office where people were coming for coaching/therapy, part of it was letting people know what I was doing, how I was doing it. thus writing the book, to kind of say, this is the process. This is how you get there. I'd spent a number of years, really hunting down what actually helped marriages and formulating, why marriages get into trouble. And so once that began to be, word on the street, and I was also connected to several communities of faith that would send people to my office, the biggest challenges of finding clients kind of took care of itself. The other challenge, though, was there came a time when I realized that I was talking with people around the world more than I was seeing people in my office because of my program that was online. And that's when I left being in the office and started working remotely. That was, I started working with people remotely back in the early 2000s. So when, back in the pandemic, when everybody started working from home, I had been doing that for quite a while. And I actually left my office practice, with some pain, because it's nice to be in an office with actual people. But I ended that in, about 2014, and was virtual from then on.
Okay, so Dr. Lee, generally what happens is, in marriages, counseling is done by one of the closed relatives, right? To whom we are like very open to talk to. It generally happens in India. I don't know about West. It may be happening that way there only. But it's done by someone who is a close relative, who is like a little elderly, but not that elder, right? A kind of mid-age person or something, who counsels the couple about if they have a fight. So how do they get convinced to go for a therapy? Go to a total stranger and talk about problems of their marriage.
So there are probably several different reasons why they would choose that. In the States, part of the reason is because they wouldn't want the relatives to know those things. That's a way of kind of shielding that. But the second is expertise. So there is more of an emphasis on the expertise of doing the counseling, doing the therapy, that would be somebody seeking out. It's kind of like seeking out a doctor. They might want somebody who has specialized training rather than just simply experience. I'm not downplaying experience, but that is more the culture of let's get somebody. In the United States, also that idea of counseling or therapy is actually has legal stuff to it. So then you're looking for someone who is legally operating as a therapist or a counselor, to be doing that work. I think we have plenty of times in the United States, because I talk with people who have parents who are giving some advice, but also feel like maybe they're too close to the situation. So they may not be seeing it realistically, or they may only be seeing it in a biased way. So, they may be seeing it as their child is not the one at fault, and sometimes they think exactly their child is at fault. And, so that bias is another piece. A lot of people want help that is, unbiased, and their opinion would be that would be outside of the family.
Right. And most of the times it also happens is that people are little hesitant to, tell everything that they are feeling, right? They try to make up few things in front of the therapist. I'm sure you must also have encountered these kind of situations. So how do you bring that out from them?
So part of my belief is that knowing all that happened doesn't change behavior. And so I'm not counting on them telling me everything. I have a theory of why marriages get into trouble, and that is because of all the energy we put into the early part of building a relationship. I call it hitting the pause button. So kind of like on the, VCR or DVD player or whatever, you hit the pause and it freezes. And people do that with their relationship because they need to do other things. Maybe they're busy with dealing with kids or with family, extended family, aging parents, their career, hobbies, activities, and all of those take energy, and they go, okay, it's okay. We have the level of love that will carry us through while we pause that relationship to do these other things. not understanding that you can't pause a relationship. And so when they come to my office, they can tell me a lot of things, but a lot of the things they're telling me are related to the fact that that is what happens when you pause the relationship, and the connection that you've shared all those times starts to wane. So the fights are because of the disconnection. The arguments about money or parenting or all those things are symptoms of that disconnection. So they don't have to tell me the whole story once I can establish that the pattern that we're talking about is because they are at a paused stage. Then we're trying to figure out how to get them past that pause point, how to get them reconnected. And so it's not that I don't worry about whether I'm hearing the whole story as much as I know that it's not entirely relevant to know every piece of the story.
So, Dr. Lee, you a couple of seconds said that there are certain patterns, right? So, based on the clients that you have helped, what are the common patterns you see?
One is I think a lot of people don't fully understand how to have a great marriage anyway. Even if they had great examples in their family, they don't see what happens kind of behind the scenes. So they don't know the inner workings of how to have a great relationship. So they're relying on what they've seen in media and other places, which sets up some false expectations about how that's going to go. So we have that pattern where they have expectations of each other, either spoken or unspoken, that are beyond what the other person is willing or knowing that they're participating in, and expectations going both ways. So you have two sets of expectations that are running into it. The disconnection, though, means that they're not having important conversations about important things in their life. They're not talking about what's important to them or what's going on in their life. And so the biggest pattern is, at the heart of it, a disconnection that ties into the fact that they're not sure how to have a great marriage anyway. So it's kind of like, if somebody just throws down all of the raw materials for building your house and they say, well, go to it. You may have some idea, but you're probably not going to be good at it. It's probably not going to be a building that stands. And then if you're doing it as if you're not talking to each other about what each of you are working on, it's probably going to be even less successful. And so that's the kind of the overall pattern that gets people in trouble. When they come to me and they name these things that are happening, they are symptoms of the disconnection. They talk about communication. That's a big one that, at least in the United States and other places, think that that's what their problem is. But people generally are pretty good communicators. It's what they're communicating. They're communicating the disconnection, the hurt, the resentment. And when you're communicating that, you end up feeling like you're the hurt one. And so, and many times I'll have two people who are equally sure that the other person is hurting them, rather than seeing their pattern that's entering into that too and causing the hurt the other way.
So you mean like you keep complaining about things, and eventually it is you who is complaining about everything?
Well, to take it a step further, many people are aware of their complaints, but missing how they are creating the situations that are leading to the other side's complaints. So both of them are in a place of feeling like they're not at fault. And so many times I would have people come in and say, I've been trying to do all these things and my spouse just won't react. And they're both telling me the same thing. And if both people think that they are trying and neither person is feeling like they are getting anything from the other person, that's the communication problem and the disconnection problem. If I am working on a project and I hit my hand with a hammer, the only thing that I know in the world is my hand is hurting. I'm so focused because that is humans. When we feel pain, that is the overwhelming thing we're aware of, not how we might be participating in the painful events. So they both end up believing that it's the spouse that's doing it.
Right. And Dr. Lee, I'm curious, in the initially when you get married, right? So everything is super exciting, everything is like, there's a lot of surprises and slowly then it fades out. And basically research shows that the risk of divorce peaks around the third year of the marriage. Why that happens?
The momentum will carry you for a distance. So we talked about the pause button. So many people hit that
Yeah.
before that 3 year mark. And it's the momentum of their relationship that carries them, to that point. And then they suddenly realize they're disconnected. They don't know what's going on. They're not doing what they used to do. There are different, so there's the 3 year mark, there's a 7 year mark, and then there are some other points in marriage that often end up being transition points. So people often, after their kids are a certain age, are at risk. When their kids are at other ages, are at risk. Career points also point to that. So there are a number of points where it's like you come up for air and realize that you're sucking in bad air, that you've been so busy with everything else, you haven't focused, and you come up and you go, oh gosh, this is yucky. I want to get out of this. And those are those danger points. But the fact is, the underlying disconnection often dates all the way back to early in the relationship because of kids or career or some other reason.
So basically, why this happens, that one person keeps on, suffering and doesn't express, right? For example, uh, say I have a dream, but then I got married. So I have to give up on that dream because I have to go to a new city, new town. I have to shift, I have to adjust to the new household and stuff, right? And then now I cannot restart my dream because I've given it up, right? So giving up was my
Hmm.
decision, right? It wasn't the decision of the other person. But still I am not telling them that this is what is hurting me. And why do people hold it back for so long time? And then they curse like, I'm in a wrong
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah. So when you're disconnected, you're not sharing your dreams. When you're disconnected, you're
Yeah.
not sharing your hurts. You're not sharing those pieces because you don't think it's going to be heard. And so that cuts it off at the beginning. But marriages are always points of couples having to align their journeys together if they're going to be successful. And the problem is when they stop doing the aligning. Most people were doing that when they got married because they thought, okay, there's a path for where we both want to go that matches. I call that the trajectory that they're talking about. We have a trajectory that matches. And so two things that often help a marriage in the beginning is having a common trajectory and a common velocity. Like, I see that we are going to a common place that'll fit together for us. And we want to do it at the same pace. If you stop talking about that, then the trajectory often changes without a conversation between you. So one person has a different trajectory, and it's fair to say, wait, I thought we were on the same page. Why are we not now? Because you stopped having conversations about the trajectory. And the velocity often changes. Things come up. Things slow the process down. But unless you're catching each other up on that, unless you're connecting at that level, then the trajectory can change in very diverse ways. It's so chaos theory at work, right? The chaos theory would say that if you have even slight changes in the beginning and you don't self-regulate that, if you don't check the systems back to reset them, you're going to have drastically different paths, even though it looked the same at the beginning. And so that trajectory changes, the velocity might change. And then suddenly, because there's not a communication about that, there's no longer sharing about that level, you're going, what happened? Why are we in this situation? And all of that still comes back to that. At some point, you disconnected, because if you hadn't disconnected, you would have been sharing that conversation. And at least there would have been some, maybe not even negotiating, because some things are just set. I mean, that's how it's going to carry. And they might have even been true before. But how do you figure out how to make it significant for both people so that both people are on a journey that feels connected?
And why do they, like, don't, none of the person in the relationship tries to make it better, right? they always try to make it worse. Why that happens?
I don't know that they're actually actively trying to make it worse as much as both people are aware of the hurt that they feel like they're receiving and they're responding from their pain. So sometimes when we're wounded, the way we act is in ways that is hurtful. Years ago, I was on the scene. A dog had been hit on the road, and I got out to take care of the dog. I'm trying to help the dog, right? Get it to the vet. The dog clomps onto my arm and latches on. Why? Because it was hurting, and I picked it up, and that hurt it, so it lashed out. The dog was not actively going, I'm going to hurt you, as much as I'm in pain and you're here and it feels like you're hurting me, so I'm going to respond. I think that happens in across all creatures, and humans included, that when we feel like we're wounded, we're likely to lash out in ways that we don't mean to be hurtful, but come across as hurtful. Anger is a secondary emotion. The primary emotion is hurt, fear, or threat. Anger that's not resolved ends up being resentment. And resentment is what gets most marriages in trouble.
So how do you resolve the anger? What are the common ways to do that?
So anger doesn't often resolve unless you resolve the hurt. So we're back to the hurt, right? And so one of the things that I recommend for people is when they feel like their spouse is angry, to ask, what are they hurt about? What are they hurt about, threatened about, or fearful about? That changes how we react. So what do we do when somebody's angry? We get angry. We match anger to anger.
Exactly.
But if somebody's hurt, what do? You be empathetic. You try to help them so they're not hurting. And so and unfortunately we get into habits of reacting to anger. So if we can accept that anger is the outward sign that there's hurt on the inside, there's fear on the inside, there's threat on the inside. And instead of reacting, I can say, I wonder what's going on inside. Then sometimes we can change the interaction, the dance around that. That's not easy. That's a change in habits, and you have to start with an understanding. And most people aren't clear about that. So just to be clear, the anger is secondary. The primary is the hurt, the fear, the threat. And then you use that as a focal point of going, okay, how do I deal with the hurt, the fear, and the threat? Part of why that is hard, just to kind of circle around, is because of the disconnection. As long as you're not working on building the connection, it's hard to be the person who can help with the hurt. So reconnecting is always part of the path. Reconnecting, having empathy. So empathy often disappears in the midst of a conflict. So I suggest that people work on being curious. We can always choose to be curious. I can always ask the question, I wonder why they're acting that way, instead of going, how dare they act that way? They have no right to be angry. I'm the one who should be angry. But asking, I wonder why, often allows us to find a new path back to empathy.
Yeah, and then that changes the perspective towards looking at, because we generally, if somebody's angry, we judge that this guy has no right to be angry, right? But then we don't know what's going inside, right?
Yeah.
Or what was the situation, what is hurting them. So that is a really beautiful insight for our viewers, that instead of reacting in the situation, be curious why this is happening.
Yeah, and that is an action. So that's a response. I can be curious. If I'm going, well, so you're telling me to do nothing. No, I'm actually saying be curious and ask the question, how can I help you? Obviously, something's going on. What can I do to help? Instead of, how dare you? You don't have any right to be angry. I'm the one who's hurt here. And so many times couples will spiral down trying to be the one who deserves to be the hurt one.
Yeah. A very common example is like you get late from the office, come home, and your wife is shouting. And basically, you also start shouting, saying like, listen, I had a lot of work in office and it's been a bad day for me as well. So instead of like, in this situation, you might go curious and just ask, okay, what happened? Why are you so angry?
So
right?
let's spiral around on that a little bit, because that's an important dynamic you just named. What happened? So there was a fact, right? The fact is somebody's late from the office. That's a fact. The
Yeah.
story that somebody tells themselves about why they're late is the problem. If you assume, for instance, if I were to, my spouse is coming home late and I assume that they must have gotten called in the office and probably don't want to be at the office either, but they're stuck there for a really good reason. When they come in the door, I would be going, I'm so sorry. Something must have happened at the office. That's not what we do as humans. So this is a human
Yeah.
piece. We create a negative story. And the negative story is they did that because they don't want to be with me. They're with somebody else, lots of other possibilities.
Yeah.
It's possible that one of those stories is true. So I'm not saying that it's not never a bad story. I'm just saying that we make up a negative story. And one of the big reasons that we make up a negative story is because of that disconnection. We get stuck in the negative story because we have that disconnection. And so instead of giving my spouse the benefit of the doubt until I know more, I jump to a conclusion, and that conclusion is going to be negative. And so I try to get people to distinguish the fact from the story. What is the fact that you know? Like if I took you to court and I would say, what do you know? I know they're late from the office. And then if they start to give me anything else, I'm like, do you know that? Like they told you they were with somebody else, or they told you they didn't care about you, or they told you they didn't want to come home. No, then that's not fact. That's story. So go with the fact and then be curious about that. I expected you an hour ago. What happened? Or is everything okay? That's a neutral check-in. Instead of, I expected you an hour ago. How dare you disrespect me that way? I've had the dinner on the table and here you are doing nothing. That's a very different story that's been told. So the fact and then checking out the fact can help to diffuse it. But I know I'm just pushing this again and again, but if you're thoroughly disconnected, you're going to jump to the most negative story your brain can cook up, and it can cook up some doozies.
Okay. And Dr. Lee, suppose now we know that you're disconnected, right? What is the first step towards, regaining the connection?
Yeah. So this is, connection happens on 3 levels, and this gives you 3 targets. So the 3 levels are, one is physical connection, loving touch. Any loving touch is that physical connection. We share this instinct with warm-blooded creatures. My dog beside me is all about physical connection. She doesn't understand when I talk to her. She just wants cuddles. That's physical connection. Next one is emotional connection. And that is when we feel like we get each other. So I get you, you get me. I support you, you support me. Those are 2 levels of that emotional connection. That is both verbal and nonverbal. Physical is nonverbal. Emotional, verbal, nonverbal. So as we've been having this conversation, when we're in agreement with each other, we're nodding. That's nonverbal. When somebody's telling me a painful story, the way I look at them, the way I turn to them, the way I don't pull out my phone and start going through whatever on my phone says, I'm attending to you. I'm listening to you. I'm supporting you. How we respond to each other nonverbally is part of that, but it's also verbal, where we can have a discussion and go, oh, okay, we're on the same page on this. Or I understand where you're coming from. We may not be on the same page, but at least I understand where you're coming from now. So that's emotional connection. The 3rd level is spiritual connection, where we're sharing what's most important to us, our dreams, our hopes, our fears. This is often where that trajectory was discovered early on in the relationship. And the velocity, we go, oh, we're on the same page. And that's where often people go, oh, this is the person for me. This is the person I want to be with, because we match on our values, on our dreams, on our hopes. We match on that. So those are 3 different levels of connection. If you're disconnected, the reconnection is going to happen on those 3 levels. Now, how disconnected you are is the question. So whenever somebody says, so what do I do? My response is always a little bit more than what you're doing on those areas. You can't do a lot more because the connection can't manage it. So if you suddenly go for these big, grand connection moments and whatever it is, trips or whatever, it can't handle that. When somebody comes in and wants to tell everything that's very important to them, sometimes it can't even handle that because you haven't built that in. So a little bit more than where you are. If physical connection is down to a minimum, patting on the arm, patting on the back, that may be the starting point. If it's emotional disconnection, to listen, to actually attend to what somebody is saying just a little bit. Maybe sharing something that you read that was important to you, or saw a movie that you really liked the message about, or something like that, that's really talking about your values, but is doing it on the down low. It's doing it by sliding it in, going, I read this article yesterday and it was really interesting. It was about this. That's telling something about what's important to you. So these are some ways to do that, but it's always a little bit more than where your disconnection is.
Superb, superb. So these are the 3 levels that you should slowly start, based on situations and, based on this. Because if you overdo it, then again, still it will feel unnatural, or basically it will feel like, you're trying to do something which does not click.
You're chasing them.
Chasing them.
And they're going to space. Yeah. So I call it being a chaser or a spacer. You want to be a pacer. You want to find the pace that you can sustain. If you chase too fast, they'll flee. If I go in my backyard, my dog's running around, and I go try to chase her, she just keeps on running. But if I go slow, she'll come over because she wants a scratch. And now I have that place of connection. And it's the same with our human connections, that if we're not careful, we overrun it. It's just like having a friend who's way too friendly and you're like, hey, I don't think I want to be with that person. Yeah. That dynamic is true in all relationships. If you go beyond what the connection can handle, you'll create the space.
Nice. That was really insightful. And Dr. Lee, you've been, working in this field for past 35 years, and you've spoken with so many couples. So for our viewers, what is your advice about things to do for a healthy marriage?
So since we'll just kind of drive this home, since we've been talking about this, but it is making sure that you manage the connection. I would say maintain, but for a lot of people, it's reset. So maintaining, that would be great at the beginning of a marriage. If somebody is still at the point where they haven't hit the pause button, you avoid that. You maintain the connection. That doesn't mean you spend as much energy on it as when you were establishing it. Obviously, there are things in life that take that, but to maintain some connection points is very important. But if not, to reconnect. So that's the first thing, is to work on reconnecting on those levels: physical, emotional, spiritual. But the other is a mindset of going, we are a team together. We're not against each other. We are a team together. And by being our best part of that team, just that mindset, we're on the team together, I think is the fundamental piece of a successful marriage. The connection, if you are acting like a good team, takes care of itself. Most couples don't make a pivot to say, we're on the same team. And then, so if you put 2 people in the room and there are only 2 people, if you're not careful, they'll become opposites. But if you say, hey, you're a team on this, then they work together on moving forward as a team. So you've talked about, how companies come together to do their best thing. How do they do it best? By being a team and saying, we have this common project, not like who's going to show who up and who's going to be the best in the room, but how do we win this project, right? How do we do that together by bringing our best skill set? How do we make sure that we're moving commonly together? Same with a couple. And that mindset changes how we go about pretty much everything in life.
One key word I would say, which I don't understand, and you can help me understand it better. Many of the marriages break because they say, because of the compatibility issue. What is compatibility in a relationship? 2 people like each other, love each other, they have common interests, right? So they get together. Now, where does this compatibility comes from?
So the interesting thing is there's so much talk about compatibility, and there's not a lot of research that proves compatibility makes a difference. In the US, we have 2 phrases that feel like they're opposite. Birds of a feather flock together. So that would be we've got to be just alike. And then we have opposites attract. It's the exact opposite sentiment, and you can, so I've seen it many times that people will say that because it matches that situation. And so then we act like that's some truth. And the fact is that we have yet to establish what is compatibility. It's not based on personality types that match. because I've seen opposite personalities be a good match. I've seen same personalities be a match. That's not it. We haven't seen it from because they come from a common background. That's not ever proven itself. It's not by common interest, because couples can have different interests, and how they connect together is the more important thing. But going back to that beginning thing where we talked about trajectory and velocity, that'll get a couple a
Yeah.
long way if they match and they stay connected on that. Like, here, I used to ask the question of couples before they got married, what are your plans about kids? And sometimes they had never had a conversation about that, but they need to be compatible on what they want in that. You can't, that's a match. You have to at least be in the ballpark with each other of how many and when, as much as you can control as a human. Obviously, there are pieces of that are beyond our control, but to at least have some agreement on that, that would be one layer that's pretty important. Do our values match up? So compatibility around velocity and trajectory are often much more powerful than any tests that anybody's created. My observation is that when things are in trouble, people claim we're not compatible because that makes them feel better about it than saying we disconnected and didn't do anything about it.
Right, right. So basically, compatibility is not like, something that you're going. I'm from the software field, and also compatibility means like, you have a software and you have a hardware that is not
Mm-hmm.
compatible. But in relationships, that does not work. It's like basically it's the disconnection between the two people that drifts them apart, right?
So if you use that example, there are different types of computers that can still talk to each other because there's something that
Yeah,
facilitates that conversation. So
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
even compatible. It
exactly.
doesn't have to be my Mac talking to your Mac or my Windows talking to your Windows. We can walk across that if we understand how to mediate that connection, how that to bridge that gap. And so
Right.
the real question is, do we have a common part of where we're headed? Do we if they're talking, why are they talking together, right? What is that they're trying to do? They're trying to solve something. And so
Yeah.
compatibility has never stood the test of research because we don't know what that looks like. But we use that as a framing of why something didn't work more often. People find their attraction. They find this person they're attracted to. That's just what happens to humans. And then the question is, do they match up on where they want to head? That's about as far as we can prove that compatibility makes a difference. If you're trying to head in two different directions, you're not going to make it. If you're matching where you're headed and you're cooperating on how to get there and you're staying connected in the conversation, you're much more likely to get to where you want to get to.
And Dr. Lee, like, you've seen a lot of a big journey like of 35 years. So marriages 35 years before and marriages today. What can you tell about them? How do you compare them?
As I was going into practice, there was still some remnants of kind of the expectations from gender descriptions that people would have, but not a lot. This is in the United States, so just to be clear, there wasn't as much. Over time, that has begun to be next to zero. That's very rarely the question. People are negotiating that openly. A lot of what comes up now is the expectation in a marriage that each person will be supportive of the other person's growth. That's what they want, not whether they're going to offer that to a spouse. Sometimes they forget that piece, but that's what they want
Hmm.
from a spouse, to feel like their spouse supports their self-expansion. Now, again, this is the US kind of world. But as I've talked to lots of other places in the world, there's a similarity that there's this new layer of expectation that you're going to allow me to explore the world the way I want to, that I don't think was nearly as true when I started practicing.
I am expecting my spouse to support me in any way possible, but I am not willing to give that support, right? So that creates a conflict. So how do you manage this conflict?
Yeah, and that conflict doesn't exist if you're working as a team.
Yeah.
That's so if I'm often trying to get people to understand the dangers of that disconnection. So they understand that because they were connected, nobody decides, not many people decide to get married without feeling like they had that connection and that love. So there's already that. But to see that they've disconnected, first of all, and to see second that they're not playing as a team, that they end up being, and this is the nature of that not getting to we, they end up being you versus me. And whenever you're at that point, everything becomes transactional. Like, what am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
And relationships are not transactional. Healthy relationships are not transactional. Healthy relationships are, some days I'm going to be doing more than, 50%. Other days I'm going to be doing less than 50%. But together we're going to conquer this. Together we're taking on life. And that we both have things that are hopes, dreams, expectations. We both have that. So how do we both support each other? That's what a team looks like. Can I make you play your best? Can you make me play my best or help me to do that? That's what a team does. If it's, I'm always going to be the center of attention and I'm always going to be the one, to use sports, taking the shot or taking the swing or whatever, that's me trying to get everything I can out of that. And you're having to serve me, as opposed to we're in this together to win. How we divide the roles is something we have to agree upon. But the fact that we're both playing to our best and helping our spouse play to their best gets rid of a lot of the problems that people get stuck in.
Nice. And Dr. Lee, while you were counseling a lot of couples, there must be some really funny kind of conversations. So can you share one of those conversations with our viewers?
So I do remember an incident where I was working with a couple and they came in, they were in a great mood. And I said to them, so, how are things going? And they're like, we only have this one problem. We get into this fight regularly. I'm like, well, tell me about it. And she looked at him and he looked at her and she said, lawnmower. That's all she said, lawnmower. And with that, everything changed. And it took me a long time to unpack it. And what I realized is that they were able to trigger each other with that single word, lawnmower. And it related to everything in their relationship. How she, so they had to buy a lawnmower. That was the reason. And she said, I need to get a lawnmower. And he said, okay, here's what I like. And he named off kind of the company. And then she went and asked her father. And then she followed her father's advice, not her husband's advice. And so from then on, that was their thing, and so, several months later, I was sitting with them and I said, so how does lawnmower feel? And they suddenly started laughing and I realized that we had resolved it. They had gotten to the point where it was no longer the trigger. But that's the fact, is that couples have those shortcut triggers. And the way you know that they're resolved is because they no longer trigger them.
And have you seen any couples fighting in the session, like pulling their hair and then, shouting and stuff like that?
We've had raised voices, but I've had a couple of people who stormed out of the office, never fighting with each other. So you can't see, but I'm 6'4". I'm not a small guy. And maybe that helps, but I think also people just know that they need to be on their best behavior. And by the way, that is something that I help couples notice, is that if you can be on your best behavior with me, you should be able to do that with each other. And if not, you're making a choice to not do that. You chose to be on your better behavior in my office. You could do that at home.
It's a better minded.
Yes.
That's awesome. And Dr. Lee, tell us about your podcast, which hosts like 5 million downloads.
Yeah, we're approaching 6 million now. So Save the Marriage Podcast is the podcast. And I started it 12 years ago. We're at 380 episodes now, or 390, just that came out this week. And it really is me having a chance, mostly me. I have a few interviews, but mostly it's me just having a chance to say, this is where people get stuck. And here are some ways that you can start working against that. It's SaveTheMarriagePodcast.com is where that's located.
Nice. And if someone wants to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, so SaveTheMarriage.com is where my program is, Save the Marriage System, and that has ways of connecting with me there.
And people across the world can connect with you. I mean, this is an online program, or like they have to?
Yeah, it's an online program, and I do coaching with people. Right now, I have several people who are nowhere near me overseas, and that's pretty typical for me to have some clients that are overseas. A phone is all I need. WhatsApp is what we use, and we just take care of it that way.
Superb. And Dr. Lee, from your journey, like what advice would you like to give to our viewers?
I probably have telegraphed this a number of times in this conversation, but work on your connection. If you're disconnected, reconnect. If you're not disconnected yet, continue to stay focused on that, because the connection will walk you through. And part of what that connection serves is to work together as a team. If you're working together as a team, that will guide you through pretty much every problem in life. You can tackle it together, because that's how you win.
And Dr. Lee, yours is a journey, like, from early day chaos to slowly finding clarity. So how would you define clarity today?
So clarity always starts with an awareness, something that opens your eyes. I think that wherever we are, when we see things differently, we gain clarity. And then the next question is, does clarity change my actions? I'm never one to believe that information by itself is enough. Clarity always has to lead to some change in our life for it to matter.
That is amazing. So clarity leads to change in your life. Only then it makes sense.
Otherwise, it's just curiosity.
Otherwise, it's just curiosity. On that note, we finish our episode today. And thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for doing this. It was an amazing conversation with you today.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So this was Dr. Lee on marriages and how he's helping couples. I'm sure you liked this episode. If you did, do hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so that you get the next episode. We do every Thursdays at 7 p.m. You were listening to Chaos to Clarity. I am Piyush Thakkar, and I'll see you in the next one.